Hey, this is Frank. You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. Do you ever feel like you have friends who sometimes just don't get each other? This is a podcast that I recorded with two of my friends, Jake and Noah. We find out the hard ways we struggle to communicate better and sometimes succeed, but sometimes not. For years, the three of us have talked about communication and how it's sometimes easier said than done. Even when we're trying to be understanding, our well-meaning intentions often get lost in translation. We decided to share these conversations with the world. Join us as we find out what happens when three friends try to learn how to really talk to each other.
Guys, I was over at Artisan today, and I got some coffee. And typically the coffee there just kind of tastes like carbon and a Walmart Danish. Just like that cardboardy.
The cardboard part, for sure.
Cheap,
Socks.
thing. I think it's just nostalgic. You go to Cross Point Community Church, and they have coffee that sucks and baked goods from Walmart.
Got it.
So anyway, that's what it tastes like. It tastes like that memory. And today, and this is the third time this has happened, I don't know what it is. Today, the coffee tasted really good. It was like fruity and floral. And I said, which one of those did you give me? Because this one is actually a good coffee. And they were like, it was Bonnie. Last time I asked that, they said it was Loch. They're all Scottish things.
Plaid.
Tartan.
Maybe they brewed well on accident today. Settings.
Like our audio settings. I think they brew the same way every time. They just get unique results.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I notice is when Noah talks, there's an echo.
Noah, talk.
I get an echo when Jake talks.
I get an echo when Jake talks.
You do?
Yeah.
I got an echo when I talked just now.
I don't get an echo when you talk.
Yep. So we got audio settings right, it sounds like.
I don't get an echo when you talk, but it is quite latent.
Yeah. You know what I'm real happy about? Is you finally have a microphone.
Yeah, regardless of how many of them you have with you, if you don't have any of these white cables right here, you can't use them.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I have two of these with me, but none of those.
True. Yeah, this is another one of those situations where it's very visual. It's a visual aid that you require.
Yeah, there's a black microphone and a white cable.
Frank was pointing at a
I pointed at the white part.
Sort of a cookies and cream situation.
The white part was plugged into his MacBook. Is plugged into his MacBook.
Yeah, do you know that Hershey's cookies and cream bars are the opposite color scheme in volume of actual cookies with cream?
Oh, I don't know that I've ever had actual cookies with cream.
Like Oreos?
It's cream with cookies?
You're thinking about cookies with cream in them. I'm thinking about like you take some cookies, you crumble them up, and you fill a bowl with cream. Like milk and cereal, but cream and cookies.
Oh, yeah, they have that. I think it's called Cocoa Krispies or something.
That also tastes like cardboard. Breakfast cereals that don't taste like what they're supposed to.
What do you think a saccade is?
I think it's a locust. I don't know.
Oh, a cicada?
Cicada?
Yeah, it's like a cicada is plural.
Cicada is just a fancy way to say it.
No.
It's like facada and facade.
Yeah.
All right.
Could you actually just ask that question again, but with different words?
Do you know what a saccade is?
No. What is it?
What?
Where did this
You're
question
the
come
linguist. I don't know, man.
Where did cicade come from?
My mind.
Okay. You know what word I like? Fecund.
Podcast idea. We make up words in our heads and then ask Jake what they mean.
All right. That's it.
I don't know if you pronounce it fecund or fecund, but, there's a certain fecundity to it.
I thought you said second.
No, this is fecund.
And I just think you're really bad at pronouncing it.
I'm really heckin' bag.
Did it?
A saccade is a rapid movement of the eye between fixation points.
Interesting.
Fecundity, the ability to produce an abundance of offspring or new growth.
Yes. I have a facet. It's a problem where my vertebrae don't articulate properly. They get stuck and jacked up in my neck instead. It's a facet, though it's spelled facet.
Oh, facet.
I don't think you have a facet in a way that others don't. You may have a facet problem.
Yeah, I think it's short for facet syndrome.
Oh.
Facet joints are hinge-like and link vertebrae together.
Yeah.
They're synovial joints. They're surrounded by a capsule of connective tissue and provides a fluid to nourish and lubricate the joint.
Well, they are.
Hey, did you feel condescended when I said that?
No. I think of you as the type of person who strives toward clarity and definitive sorts of boundaries on things,
Yeah, I just wanted you to
precision.
I wanted you to not have to say this to someone who would find it bothersome that you think you are the only person who has a facet.
Gotcha.
That's why I said it. Poised said I should use a positive tone when delivering messages like this.
Hey, you're so stupid. Not everybody's as stupid as you, though. You should feel special. I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of using a positive tone to condescend.
Yeah, I didn't find it condescending at all, personally, like while doing it. They said I should use a positive tone. So
if you condescend with a positive tone, is it condescending? Condescending?
Condescending?
Because you're not descending. That's negative, sort of down. Condescending.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good podcast today.
It's Latin. It means with ascending.
Urban Dictionary has condescending in.
What's it saying there?
To condescend from below. To make fun of someone who, in fact, at least in the area in which they are being made fun of, is actually one superior.
Oh.
Nice. What's a spawn con?
I don't know. Tell us.
Tell us, Noah.
Spawn con?
Yeah. You're on Urban Dictionary.
I'm not anymore.
Oh, I thought I was going to tell you words on Urban Dictionary and you told us what they were.
Have you guys ever heard of backshift?
You're going to have to say that again.
Backshift? Not backdraft. Backshift.
Are you talking about the keyboard shortcut? Back plus shift?
No, but is there a... Oh, you mean backspace.
Nope.
This is also...
Back.
Oh, like the back arrow?
Yeah.
Do you think for Hebrew speakers that's the right arrow? Because they read from right to left. In any case,
maybe. I don't know. When you backshift on a keyboard, you select the last character you typed.
Interesting. I don't know. That's actually not what I'm referring to. I didn't even know that.
No, you know.
Backshift is a linguistic phenomenon in which when new phrases are introduced to a language, the emphasis starts on the first syllable. So like, for instance, with hot dog, right now it's on the last syllable, right? But when it was first introduced, it might have been like hot dog or Chinese food, right? It's like, it wasn't a unified sort of unit of, a noun. So it was like this adjective and the noun. But as it becomes more and more, integrated into the language, we change it. So it used to be rewind something, but now it's rewind it. And that sort of shift changes it into a single noun.
That's cool. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that when we were pronouncing fecund and fecund.
So what's the most exaggerated version of hot dog you could think of, like when it first came out?
Hot dog?
See, I felt like the dog was more emphasized there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hot dog.
That's one hot dog.
That's one hot dog.
I think you just kind of, sounded like a,
yeah, it's brand new to the language, so no one knows about the second word yet.
They knew about dogs before they knew about hot
Yeah, but
dogs.
it's 1% of the volume.
Oh.
Is it a volume thing?
It's not. This reminds me of whenever you said that Spanish speakers often put a woohoo at the end of words.
Yeah, I think Alejandro said that to me, actually. But
Really? That sounded like a very frank expression. I've never met Alejandro.
yeah, maybe it was me. It could have been.
Of all the people I've ever met in the world, only one has ever said woohoo.
I sometimes type it, but I never say it. Sort of like going down a slide and saying, wee!
Yeah, the Spanish language requires so much like pitch shift. What am I, like a piano or something? I don't know. You can't just speak.
Yeah. Did you know that the full name of a piano is actually pianoforte? It's two Latin words. Piano actually means soft. Forte means loud. So it's capable of doing both. That's why it's called pianoforte, but we shifted it and now we just call it piano. And we call people who play the piano pianist.
Huh.
Okay. Anyway, what's the topic of today? We want to talk about mindfulness?
Is that what we want to talk about? Noah seems to be drowning.
In air?
One of my favorite things over the course of this podcast are Jake transitions.
Yeah, they're good.
They're always abrupt. And this one, it just felt abrupt and something else.
It's definitely important to me to make them abrupt, and I like to create a high contrast juxtaposition.
I know, but it was just so what's the topic of today? Do you want to talk about mindfulness?
It's like the least. Yeah. Did you do it on purpose?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When mindfulness was first talked about, it was actually called mindfulness. But since it's become more integrated in the language,
it got shifted.
I always say mindfulness.
Oh, interesting.
I don't say that.
Really? What do you say?
I don't think I vocally reference mindfulness that often.
Oh, you just did. What's up now?
I don't think it's often still. But if I say like 30 times in the next 4 minutes, then it will have become often.
I gotcha. Yeah, what is the metric for often?
I think it's more than 50% of the time.
More than 50% of the time, I talk about nothing. but I would still say I talk
agree
about
with
certain
that.
things a lot. Anyway, Frank, you've got some experience with mindfulness.
Wait, we're talking about mindfulness? Was that the plan?
No, there was no plan.
Mindfulness, huh?
Uh-huh. Right now, I would love to talk about that.
You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. In these episodes, we're learning. We don't know what we're doing yet, and sometimes it shows. We think there's beauty in being a beginner, and we're learning from them, so we publish them. So thanks for listening, and rest assured that there will be better Unbecoming Platypus podcasts ahead. All right. I think it's meditation watered down to one ultra simple practice, noticing what your mind is thinking without judging the thoughts.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, well, why?
I mean, yeah, it's just really concise.
Yep.
I appreciated the concision of what you think. Well, yeah, I mean, a few years ago, I feel like this was like a buzzword, right? Mindfulness, it kept popping up everywhere. And I didn't really know what it was, but I think I got like the mindfulness app. My experience with it was, this is really terrible. I hate this so much. I did it every day for like...
Which app?
I think it's called Mindfulness. Headspace. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We are not sponsored by Headspace. I really liked the guy's voice. It was fantastic. But I definitely... It was just brand new to me. I didn't really understand what mindfulness was. I was just like, oh, they say this is healthy. Let's do this. So I followed it. I did it like every day for 9 months. And it was just frustrating. Like every single day. That was my experience with it. Fast forward like 2 years later and something just clicked. And I went, oh, this is fantastic. This is the best thing I've ever done in my life. And then I know, you were living in a different state and I didn't really talk to you much for a few years. And then you came back and you were like, everybody should get the Waking Up app by Sam Harris.
Yeah. It's a good app.
Yeah. What was your experience with it? What introduced you to mindfulness and what was your trajectory?
Probably the original like introduction was some CBT or DBT skill. Just about like observation, noticing. And then at some point I got Sam Harris's app, but mostly because I liked his writing, not because I knew he knew a lot about mindfulness or anything, or was teaching that really. But he does a very good job. And I think it's a skill most people can benefit from, to sort of be able to know what it's like to be in their mind rather than just think their mind is them.
Yeah, that was my experience. Was like, I felt as though for those 9 months, it was just like count your breaths, but there was no goal. There was no like structure around this or why. And when I say I had that like click moment a couple of years later, it was really just like creating this parallel between watching the breath happen and watching thoughts happen and seeing those similarities, being like, oh, I don't control the breath. It occurs outside of my conscious awareness. I don't control what thoughts come into my head. I don't control what feelings I happen to have or reactions or, I have to some sort of stimulus, but I am aware of them. I am outside of them. I am not them. And so like that exercise of paying attention to the breath all of a sudden became this crucial, like strengthening training of that ability to just sit back separate from the experience itself. I mean, obviously the results of that, the benefits of that are myriad. But for me, I think I saw it most in being a parent. It was like, my son is this emotional little bundle that really has no control over what is, happening second to second. And if he doesn't get the fruit snack that he wanted, he's going to, rage out in the middle of the grocery store as a 2 or 3 year old or whatever. And, being triggered by that, if I still thought I was my emotions, I would rage right back out on him, continuing this sort of chain of trauma. But instead, if I can sit back away from that, all of a sudden I get to absorb his emotions. All of a sudden I get to model a sort of stillness and a chosen response instead of an instinctual reaction. And that was like the biggest fruit that I saw from it right away, where I was like, yeah, this is worth it. I'm going to keep looking at this.
Yeah.
Do you have any experiences with it, Noah? Like, have you done any mindfulness exercises or training or anything?
Sure. Just basic meditation. I still do it. I don't do it as regularly as I should. There was a time that I was doing it every single day. And I have similar thoughts. I think that the biggest benefit I saw was that it let me be an observer of my thoughts. Like what you were saying, without judgment, being able to look at them and then explore them in that way, as opposed to thinking them, if you will. So I really like it. I also just really like the practice of quietness, being able to quiet the brain, resting in that way.
Yeah. It is interesting. And that's like a side effect that I think I've been looking at recently, is this sort of the calming of the central nervous system. That stillness, that quietness really has a, the body sort of follows the mind follows the body. If I put myself in a state where it's all rest and I am safe and I am still, when the nervous system really quiets down, it's like the mind kind of follows that, and it's so much easier to sit back and have that distance. I've been really honing in on doing this like every morning. It's just sort of part of the routine these days. And some days the mind is quiet. Some days the mind is loud and speeding all over the place. And, it's easy to get frustrated on those days that it's going crazy. But I think those are the most important ones as well, because they most closely mimic what it's like to be in the middle of, work and getting hit up by, 3 different people at the same time. And my brain actually having to find that stillness in the midst of the chaos. That is where the training occurred.
Definitely.
It's one of the things I liked about taking improv classes. You can't, when you're doing improv and you're with a scene partner on stage, you have to pay attention to what's happening instead of following your own thoughts. Because if you get lost in your thoughts, you're going to break the scene. It's, because you're not paying attention to what your scene partner's saying and doing and the cues they're giving you. So you have to almost be on the outside looking in, paying attention to everything that's happening so you can respond to that, as opposed to letting your thoughts control you and take you a certain way. It's about responding instead of being controlled.
Absolutely. That sort of presence, I've often said that there are certain things that bring me back into this moment. I'm this heady person. I really, in some ways, dissociate from my physical experience in so many ways. But the things that bring me back are things like music, sex, art, like those things. I'm not in my head. I am in that moment. I'm paying attention, and like it's this natural sort of snap to reality. And it's just so easy to lose myself, and I start reacting as opposed to responding. And I think the distinction there is important. But yeah, that makes so much sense, like in that live sort of performance. What are some of the ways that you, Frank, feel like you see it playing out in like your day to day?
I think it feels pretty common to me nowadays to be in some sort of mindful state. That took a long time. I specifically remember a few days in which it really unlocked. There's some, I don't know what it's called or what day it was or anything, but there's some waking up daily meditation that like really unlocks it for me. And he's talking about your coworkers, and today practice this sort of specific way to react or something. And like he talks about this all the time, different ways to integrate mindfulness into your day, but that specific one helped me a lot. There's also Layla Hormozi talks about, there was a business owner that was talking about her people, her leaders in her company were like problematic. They were bringing her problems and she would have to solve them for them. And she could hardly get anything done because there were just so many inputs from all these people who were bringing her all these problems. And Layla was like, just, what I do is I delay those by 3 days. So if someone brings me a problem, I say, okay, it's Friday. Okay, well, let's have a meeting Tuesday about that. And then the whole culture goes, there aren't any crises. It's like up here to down there. I think this sort of thing can happen locally inside a person too, where you're just like, I grew, like the way I grew up, everything was a crisis. Like I was a lot of times in fear. I just don't have very many crises anymore. I guess it plays out like that. I don't know. Is that an answer?
No, I love it. I can relate to that in some way. I think that for me, I'm still kind of building. It is absolutely a tool in my tool belt, but it is not something that I reach for instinctually at this point. There's still absolutely this volatility in me that I want to get to the place where when I feel that thing, it, rather than a trigger for reaction, it is a trigger for introspection. It's a trigger for calm down, and maybe employing something like a policy where it's like, hey, you don't respond to this for 10 seconds. Like that 10 seconds is the 3 days in your example. And it's like, what does that 10 seconds do? It changes everything potentially. Even just having that rule might make it 30 seconds, because in the 10 seconds you realize, wait, everything that comes to mind, it's that old adage is like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that really is a pragmatic approach to this. It's like, hey, be mindful of what's actually about to happen. Are you being the person you want to be?
Yeah. And you can't go too far. And I have at times gone too far into introspection where I'm like, I need to figure out what I want to do here for like a day. But I should have reacted by now.
Sure.
So
it's probably better to err on that side than to err on the other side, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's true. But there's still both errors, I think.
Yeah.
Not on everything. Like I don't think a thought goes by like I should readjust my investment strategy today. Like I better act right now. You don't need to.
Yeah.
But as a paramedic, if someone's dying in front of you, you probably should react now.
Sure.
So, it just depends on the scope of the problem, I think. But there's certainly too much introspection that can happen.
Yeah. No doubt. It's a balance. I think that there are people, when I think about the Enneagram, I think there are more incendiary types just naturally. And then there are whatever the opposite of that would be, just like these very passive people like the 9. And it's like, I actually have to bring myself from this ethereal abstract space into my body, into my response to even know that I'm supposed to, react in some way. And I think that's the opposite side where it's like, the incendiary type is I have such a strong sense of self that I have to defend it at every turn. And then the other side is I have no sense of self, and that person is absolutely taking advantage of me and my family and all this stuff. And I'm just like letting it happen because I'm unaware or something. Those are like the two sides of the continuum that I see. And, yeah, you're right. They are both sort of an error. If you're coming from the incendiary side, you're probably not likely to go to that far extreme. But if you're coming from the selfless, I have no boundaries side, then the incendiary might actually look a little bit healthier if you gravitate that direction.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like if you can just do pretty quickly what you want to do, like so find this space where you can notice and then choose your reaction and do it in some small amount of time. That's probably good for most people.
Mm-hmm.
I had yesterday we were in St. Charles, and there's a store down there that like I didn't know about this tradition, but we walked in there and she's like, we have a great tradition here. It's been going on for 7 years and I want you to participate in it. And here's the Sharpie, and you just find a spot in the store, like on the floor, the walls, and write your name. And there are like names everywhere. It's like there's not a space basically to write. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so we're like looking around. We walk around most of the store. There's no space. So then we see this like knife spinny rack thing. And it's got like half full of names. Or a quarter or something. There's a bunch of names on it. And so I start writing on it my name, which I don't care about this, but I'm doing it because this lady asked me to. And, it's whatever. It's their tradition. So I'm starting to write on it. And she's like, no, screaming across the store. And I'm like, that can't be for me, right? And I continue writing. And so she runs to us while yelling no. And she's like, stop. And I'm like, oh, all right, sure. She's like, sorry, I didn't handle that very well. I'm like, okay. She's like, you can't write on that. I'm like, all right. And then she, for 10 minutes, explained why I can't very loudly with everyone in the store, like, staring at us.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm just like, oh, well, she was able to notice that she didn't handle this very well, but she was not able to change her reaction. Like, she had to continue down this path. And I just thought that was interesting.
That is that to me is like this sort of journey toward living more mindfully. It might be one of the first steps you take. It's like, oh, no, I see what's going on here. But yeah, I'm not actually changing anything yet. And the more space that you build, the more that you train this, the stronger you become. That resistance feels a little bit less. And it's like putting more weight on a barbell or something like that. If I can deadlift 400 pounds, all of a sudden 200 feels a little bit less.
Yeah, I thought it was good that she was able to notice it. She just immediately didn't do anything about it.
That is really interesting. I mean, why can you write on everything except
the
for that?
owner will be furious. I don't, not,
Okay.
must not be the owner of the store who has writing on every surface he rents.
Yeah.
It must be the owner of the knife rack thing. I don't know what owner she's
Gotcha.
talking about, but
He likes for it to only have a quarter full of names.
yeah, she's like, we just can't get it off. I've tried to get it off. And I'm like, yeah, the lack of you getting it off is why it has names on it, which is why I thought it would be okay to add one.
Nice.
She's like, I even walked to the store and got alcohol and tried that and it didn't work. And I was like, oh, maybe you want to try acetone. And she's like, that won't work either.
Yeah, maybe she didn't drink enough.
I think that's exactly the point, though, is the idea that mindfulness allows you to see and respond as opposed to react. You mentioned being a paramedic, and there are times that you want to react and do things quickly, but that's a physiological response as much as it is a mental one. Like you have adrenaline and these other things that are happening in your body that raise your awareness of the situation.
Yeah, this is a weird topic, and it's actually commonly disputed even by like scientists who research it. But certainly at first, I agree with you. Like if you haven't been on very many cardiac arrests, there's adrenaline. If you've been on thousands of them, there's less adrenaline. You just know the best right thing to do and you're doing it.
Sure. There's also experience in these things that play into it. But I'm just saying there's a difference between, like, this woman had a physical response. Her brain and body alerted her to a problem and she reacted to the problem.
Yeah.
And so what I think mindfulness practice does is allows you to slow that down and see and respond as opposed to react. And so there is this learning period that happens if you practice it daily.
Yeah.
And there are times and things that happen in life where you do need to react for safety.
Definitely.
And so I think that's the real difference.
Yeah. There's a layer that we haven't really talked about, but you just kind of referenced to, which is like, for me, mindfulness allows me to assess the meaning that got automatically assigned.
I was just about to say that. Continue.
Yeah. So for that lady, maybe this meaning was something like, I'm going to get fired if I let people write on this thing. Like,
sure.
This is maybe her job and how she pays for her kids' food. And like, there's so much meaning there. For me, I'm like, you just told me to write on something in this place. Like, what could you possibly be mad about, But if you see a lot of thoughts go by, then you start to recognize that there's some meaning that's auto-assigned. And just this process over and over, you start to see that like, oh, I could change that meaning easily if I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that way of thinking about it, because that teaches you something about yourself. Which is, what am I projecting onto this situation? The other thing that it does, though, another way of saying it, honestly, is it allows you to see reality on reality's terms. Like, you know what I mean? When you take that projection and you say, okay, that's me, and you take it out of the picture, all of a sudden, those 10 seconds that you took to assess it, you hear the actual words that came out of a person's mouth instead of the translation that you put on it. You see what's actually going on here instead of, that you're a first-time customer as opposed to this person who's obviously responding to something historically. Like, oh, I got in trouble for that last time. I need to yell and make sure that everybody else in the store hears it so that they don't do this too. Right? It's instead actually confronting reality for what's actually happening.
Right. Yeah, there is another benefit too, which is that if you do this practice, then you start to see how others might be reacting to a meaning rather than the event that happened in their life. And so it's a lot easier to have compassion for someone, even if their words don't like prompt you to compassion. You're just like, oh, like they're going through that. Obviously, this is like, I did not do what they're claiming happened here.
Yeah. Well, and compassion is huge. And then, I think an attribute of compassion, or maybe compassion is an attribute of this, is empathy. I think the more that you become familiar with the mental processes in your own mind, the ways that you trick yourself, the more capable you are of saying, oh, I can put myself in this person's shoes. I can see what's going on here. You want to be careful not to project and, say that everybody has the same story as you, but at the same time, like extending that sort of, bridge is huge for relating to people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are overlaps in human experience. So sometimes you might have the same background and the same sort of tendencies, but
yeah,
in general, just noticing the tendencies people have, there are people who are like very prone to just having a happy response regardless of the situations. There are people who are angry no matter what's happening. And you might think, if you're new to them, that they're angry at you. But
sure,
they're just angry. They just tend towards anger.
Yeah.
So, there's extra benefit you get from mindfulness, I suppose.
Yeah. I genuinely not only have benefited from it so far, but it's also becoming clearer and clearer how I can benefit from it in the future. One of the things that sort of exercise of distance and sitting back and looking at things, a little bit more objectively has done for me is you can do that sort of on the micro level in that moment, but you can also do it with your entire life. And it helps to zoom out and say, okay, what is the situation? What decisions have I made to get myself in this situation? Where do I want to be going? Am I currently headed there? If these things don't look good, how do I change that? Right. And then you look at it on the macro scale. It was one of the things that kind of led me to changing my habits around drinking as well. It was like, number one, I could see myself living a life without this thing, despite the sort of perceived positive benefits that I thought I was getting. And once I saw that and projected myself into that reality, I looked at my current reality and said, okay, am I headed in that direction? No. What's in the way? It's this thing. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's see where this goes. And I don't know, I see those as mirrors of each other on a micro and macro scale.
I was going to bring this up is I think in different language, when you can step back and observe without judgment, now you're able to better set intentions, which is what I think you're saying. Yeah. So you're able to go, okay, this is what I want to do with my thoughts, as opposed to my thoughts are controlling me, and look where it's gotten me.
Yeah. Yeah. Even more than thoughts, I think. Yesterday on Twitter, some people were talking about starting a small business and worrying about like essentially needing the cash flow and how stressful this is. And like, I don't know, there's a guy that follows me that's really considering starting something himself. And he was talking about a lot of the business owners he knows are just like more stressed than they were as an employee because they have so many different things and they're not sure what they're doing. And it's difficult to prioritize for what's working if you need all the cash that's coming from every little weird zone. But if you can step back and say, like, I mean, it applies to anything, but I have cash reserve. Let's stop doing the things that suck. Reprioritize for what doesn't suck. It's the same thing with your thoughts or actions, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you like no longer need to defend, when you no longer need to assert yourself, all of a sudden you have the power to make the decisions you want to make. Something I still kind of struggle with, struggle might not be the right word. It's something I'm aware of, is noticing the real reaction inside myself, choosing to respond the way that I want to, and still honoring the person that I am. And so for instance, let's say somebody says something to me and it makes me angry. I feel a physiological rage response to something. I take my time, I respond to it, and I say, this isn't going to bother me for right now. But then taking that and processing it and saying, okay, but that really was a trigger. I really did have a response to this, a reaction to this. Where's that coming from? How much of it is me? How much of it is them? And how do I honor the real boundaries of my sort of biopsycho, shell, this person that I am? Trying to figure that out, because I don't want to present myself as, hey, I processed this information, and so nothing you say will ever hurt me. Like, I'm capable of being hurt.
Yeah. So there's something you said that that doesn't feel like the most direct path or something to me. I don't know what that means. It might just be a word language thing. But I'm not responding to this for now. Feels a little like not allowing it.
Okay. I'm still confused.
Yeah, so I think you can feel very angry and still be mindful.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm agreeing. I'm saying I feel anger. I'm aware of it. And because I'm aware of it, I get to choose my response instead of reacting. But just because I respond in this sort of processed manner, I processed it and I handled it in a healthy way, the reaction was still there. The stimulus still triggered a reaction in me. Mm-hmm. Now, some of that is me, and some of it may be someone else. And it's just, I'm still trying to figure this out, because I've lived most of my life in a sort of boundaryless way. I let other people control my decisions. I let other people tell me how to feel. And now I'm kind of coming into this position of honoring myself, giving myself the ability to exist in the world, to have feelings, to have desires, and to really exert that in the world around me. So this feeling of anger that I never allowed myself to really perceive or entertain before is a new one for me. I don't want to react in rage, and I'm not going to, but I'm trying to figure out for myself.
Yeah, I think that's
what
it
role
right
does
there.
it have.
Why wouldn't you? It's okay to.
Sometimes I do. I don't want to react, though. I could respond in an angry way. But is that the most productive thing? I don't know. I think it's important for people to see how they affect you, I guess.
Yeah. It feels like there's resistance in there that isn't optimal.
How do you mean?
I'm not going to, whatever you said, react. I will respond.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I react. It doesn't usually turn out well for me.
Do you feel like there's not enough time to change the meaning before you react? Or to assess the meaning?
Quite specifically, if I'm calling it a reaction, I'm kind of saying I haven't assessed the meaning. I'm calling reaction, I'm referring to the instinct, unprocessed cause and effect. If I use the word response, I'm referring to it has been assessed, and I still think responding in rage is the right decision. Like, I think you could respond and not be angry, or you could respond and you could be angry. Either one is, appropriate depending on the context.
Yeah, I guess rage might be okay sometimes. Like, I don't know that it's bad or good, but think I tend to avoid it, It's not that there aren't things that enrage me. That's probably true, but I just remove them casually,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get in a
maybe
bar fight or something,
Oh, certainly. No, I'm still not going to do that either. And maybe I'm not presenting this well. It's definitely complicated. It's just this idea of acknowledging my whole self, like honoring my whole person, honoring my history by acknowledging that it is true that something made me angry, and then making this conscious choice. What I'm saying is I don't really have this framework for choosing whether or not it's right to show that anger in a given situation. Because my entire history up until now has told me, you stuff that down, you never show it, anything like that. So it's not a well-developed process to know how to respond. It's either react with full-blown rage, or it's stuff it down and don't feel anything at all. I'm working on bridging that gap.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just a personal anecdote where it's like, as you become more mindful, you do notice these things happening. You do start to honor other parts of yourselves that maybe you weren't aware of. And there will come a time probably where you're like, oh, wow, I repressed that from some trauma in my childhood or more recently or whatever it is. And then be like, oh, I'm going to actively go through the steps of training this as well.
Yeah. I think I almost believe, but don't, that trauma is totally assigned meaning. So that's probably where I get lost on it, or disagree or something.
Mm-hmm.
So suppose I am prone to anger. I don't think I am, but suppose someone is in this example. You have two sort of options, I think. You can say, if I'm prone to anger, it must be this unresolved trauma that I need to work. Or you can say, that's like a short circuit. Something's wrong there, so I should write it. And the importance of finding out the intricate details are different if you feel that it's a trauma, if it has this assigned meaning that it needs all this work versus the wire is connected to the wrong neuron. Let me fix that.
Yeah, I don't think that we're saying anything different, honestly.
One just is a lot more painful to go through.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, this is sort of obviously a divergence from where we were, but you're right. It is more painful. I think perhaps, though, that it is more lasting. I think that there is a level of saying, I have acknowledged that there's a short circuit. I'm going to create a new circuit. Doesn't necessarily snip the connection of the original one. It's still there somewhere, kind of undealt with. You're just creating a new one as well. So when you get to that fork in the road, you can go left or right now, as opposed to always right. But you still could go right. And maybe understanding where that's coming from is a longer, more arduous journey, but it also helps you to find closure. When I think of this, I think of like people who have a phantom limb syndrome. And one of the most interesting fixes for this is, let's say that I'm missing my right arm and I have pain in that extremity. They'll actually put a mirror where the right arm is supposed to be so you can see your left arm. They'll have you make like a fist or something like that, and then watch yourself in that mirror as if it's your right arm opening that hand. And the result is that this sort of phantom pain from a limb that is no longer even there actually releases. So sure. I think there is this level of closure that happens in the brain that that helps you to create and even close neural pathways.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's why I said I almost believe or something like that. I think I should always disclaim this sort of conversation because I'm not like some science expert. But there's myelin. Do you know about myelination?
No.
All right. So like when and like I said, someone better can explain this on the internet. Go find them and they'll do a better job than this, but I'll try.
Sure.
So in neural circuits, the more frequently that you use them, the more insulated they become with brain tissue called myelin. So that the likelihood of taking the other pathway becomes less. Mm-hmm. So obviously, if you have this like one you've taken many, many times, it has a lot of myelin. So maybe you do need to spend some like arduous process to undo it. But if not, I mean, it would just certainly be easier to create a new one, create a new pathway. So yeah, there are things that come up sometimes that I'm like, man, how's that still in there? So I think you're right. But most of the things that are minor shifts are not like huge identity pieces, just seem to be able to be rewired.
Yeah. I see that. I just also think that trauma absolutely is assigned meaning in some way, but I don't think that it's a consciously assigned meaning in most cases. And because it's subconscious, you might go down that same pathway over and over without ever looking at it. And as such, it's a well-worn, highly myelinated pathway. And usually probably is the case if it's something you've been doing since childhood or something. You just take it for granted that it's normal or not normal.
Yeah. And I think just finding out the assigned meaning and changing it may promote myelination of a new pathway.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not easy. And in my experience, sometimes it isn't at all easy. And so you've got to like figure out like what the heck happened here and go, like, was this the first time I felt this way? This is what this is all about for me. Like,
yeah,
when was? And sometimes that takes years, but
true.
I think there's a danger in if you end up being too analytical about, if you're able to step back from your thoughts and look at them and then respond, I think there's a danger in that coming back around and those thoughts then controlling you. So you're in, you know what I mean? Like you analyze so much that now you're back into the thought process as opposed to the mindfulness state. Yeah. So I think there's a danger in that. But I also think I stepped out to use the bathroom, so I didn't catch everything you and Jake were just talking about. But I think there's that intention piece that I brought up, I think is what you were saying about rewiring.
Yeah.
You can, if you're able to step back, be mindful, notice your thoughts, and then set intentions to essentially respond differently.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily have to go through that entire process of analysis, essentially.
Yeah. So I think a prime example, I've never thought of this before in this way, but I have probably some propensity towards mindless eating or addiction to food or something. And I could go to a therapist and spend hours and hours on the couch and like talk through why I would have ever responded to stress in my life with eating, and maybe get somewhere to subconscious meaning and rework it this way. Or I can just take pictures when I eat and at the end of the day go, oh, I got to like make a change here. This is off path. It's not where I want to be. And that certainly seems easier than months on the couch or whatever.
For sure. And there's value in both. no doubt about it.
Oh, for sure.
But I just think that there is a danger in it. Like over-analysis can circle you right back to where you started before the mindfulness practice, which is now my thoughts are controlling me. They're different thoughts, but they're controlling me, as opposed to, okay, I'm able to notice these and now I can choose to respond differently, which is that intention piece that I was talking about.
Sure. So that's interesting in and of itself, because, like, I don't know, people think of me, or at least you. I've heard you say this before, that, wow, you really think about things, way more than I do, or you analyze things a lot more than I do. And I think that's a really interesting perspective, because at least for me, what I'm really doing is describing what's happening almost automatically. I don't feel as though I'm over analyzing these things, but if you ask me what's happening, I can tell you. You know what I mean? And I think what you said is important. It is, you don't want to over analyze it, but I think that as you become more aware of yourself and what's happening, you also have this potential to create an analogy to biohack your mental processes. The more that we understand the human body and what's actually happening to it as we change its environment, we can utilize what it's doing naturally to benefit it. So if I see, for instance, if we're thinking about trauma, that if I create a sort of villain out of the trauma, I'm in some way actually sort of foundationalizing a path forward that says, I do want to take this new pathway because the other one is bad. It's not good, and that, so I've got this natural process that sort of moralizes things in a little way. It's not good to moralize things. I know this, but it is happening naturally. So if I harness that and I say, I don't want to do the thing that's based in trauma, all of a sudden I've got more like motivation to do the other pathway.
Yeah. I don't want to discount the benefit of being able to step back and look at yourself and then analyze it and understand what's happening. I'm not saying don't analyze ever or at all. That wasn't my point.
Sure.
And I also hear, you mentioned the Enneagram and the differences in how people work. I'm an intuitive type. And so a lot of my processing happens in the body. And I go to 5 in unhealth, dishealth. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that. But the times that I'm most stressed, I find myself over analyzing things. And so my sort of reaction to over analysis is, oh, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
I understand that. And I'm not saying that it couldn't be healthy for you. I'm just simply saying that I have found value in being able to. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but I do think this is sort of what you were saying about rewiring, is that you can choose to step back, look at your behavior, understand it, sure, and then just choose to respond differently. And that is, again, that's the intention part, saying, okay, I intend to do this thing differently. When I come across this is how I intend to respond to that. And that is that rewiring piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's times where it's like so subconscious and it's a part of your identity, and like you really do need to do the work on a couch with a therapist, or like go through this as a trauma, because it is a deeply assigned meaning and it's core to who you are or something. I also think there are times where it's like there's too much urgency. This is too important. Like, you are 20 years into processing this trauma and it isn't getting better. Like, let's find practical ways to rewire today.
Sure.
For me, like I mentioned some processed food stuff while you're in the bathroom, but for me, like I fought food addictive tendencies or mindless eating for years via like, I just got to figure out like why I did those behaviors as a kid. And there's 100 reasons that TV, there's advertising, my home was stressful. Like it was an unstable home. My dad was in prison. I have the highest ACE score of anyone I know. Like the reasons are endless, and I could spend the rest of my life on a therapist's couch trying to figure out why I do these things and get to the subconscious meaning.
Yeah.
Or I can take pictures of my food when I eat. This is a simple shift, a simple rewire. And at the end of the day, I log my food, and if it's off track, if it's not where I'm intending to go, I make adjustments. I just pulled it into the conscious, the actual behavior needed.
Yeah.
This is a rewire that does not require the sort of 20 years on the couch or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's value in both. And like, it depends on the type of issue it is. Like, on some level, this is a nutrition issue. I just need to fix the nutrition. And I've processed a lot of the like feeling stuff, but just eating is not mindful for me. It's not easy to get it into that space. It's especially if there's stress, I just go, order food or something. So taking pictures is like very practical, simple hack. It works really well for me. So I do it, and it took care of the issue.
That makes so much sense. I do think there is a tipping point where something that began as a trauma response just becomes a natural, habitual, behavioral part of who you are. And I'm not sure, when that happens or what the factors in that are, but I completely agree. I think when you notice something that's wrong, like it makes sense to take immediate action. And if you're already, moving that direction, sure, it will help to look into what the root causes were. I think that it takes some of the power away from the cause response sort of cycle. But you're right, it's not necessary to facilitate behavior change. I think that it can help to concretize it, but not necessary.
I think for me, even what I was saying about being an Enneagram and like going to like looking for information, going to that 5 in unhealth and trying to find information to make my situation better, even stepping back, realizing that when I learned about the Enneagram and when I really started to understand how I work, now I don't get to that place because I don't let myself. And the only thing that's changed is if I find myself searching for that information to make me feel better or to solve a problem, I just go, oh, stop. This isn't healthy. Stop. That's it. I'm not trying to make the situation better. And that's the point. I'm literally going, okay, you're looking for this information to feel better. Stop. And that is mindfulness.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like with me and alcohol, I think there was probably a week or two where I was having a physiological sort of response. The way it works is like at a certain time of day, if you typically drink at that time of day, your hormonal expression will change slightly to compensate for the chemical you're about to imbibe, and then you have it and it brings you back to homeostasis. So until the body finds that balance again, it's going to keep doing that compensation. Physiological response is gone a week, 2 weeks later. The mental sort of, I'm bored and now I want this to help me not be bored anymore. That connection, that can last for a very, very long time. And I still notice that today. One of my favorite things to do was just like, there's not much going on. I want it to feel more exciting than just an average, normal every day. And I'm going to go sit on a patio and have a cocktail and read. That connection is still there. I'm bored. I want this. And when I notice it, I just go, oh, there's a million things to do, including being bored. That's okay.
Yeah. That probably has something to do with neuroplasticity as well. So just you do the same thing for an extended period of time and then your brain changes. Yeah. Period. Yeah. No matter what it is.
Yeah. Food was like the everything for so long. Like I do not think mindless eating is a trauma response for me. I think it is literally what we did. it just is a part of how my life was for growing up. Like, we did it if things were good. We did it when things were bad. We did it when things were everything. It was just like never, ever got thought about once for years and years and years. And so I can go talk to a therapist and be like, what do you think's causing this? But it's caused by that we did it a lot.
Hmm.
I think that's it. And there were all kinds of emotional problems that I've worked through, but they're not even the same issue.
Hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
Like, it's payday. We're getting steak and shakes or whatever. That was a part of my life. I don't know that that's trauma. You can call it that if you want, but
it's a funny thing. It's like we have like reward centers, and if you're feeling bad and you give yourself a certain chemical or a certain environmental stimulus, when you're feeling bad and it makes you feel better, the next time you feel bad, you want that thing again. If you're feeling great and you do a thing and it makes you feel even better, you go, I'm feeling great. I want this thing. And all of a sudden you're having big meals of processed food, or you're drinking alcohol whenever you're sad, and you're doing it when you're celebrating. And it's just like, oh, this is just happening because I fed into my natural system. I gave myself this thing at every turn for a while. And now anytime there's a stimulus of any kind, I want it.
Yeah. You could say, like, you can victimize someone if you want and be like, my family did that to me. They trained me that way.
Oh, sure.
And this will make it very traumatic and give you a whole bunch of shit to process.
Sure.
It doesn't seem beneficial to me. Like, it's not like my parents were like, I'm going to get my kid, like they just didn't know better. The actual advice from the government on all the little food guide pyramids in every school were 6 to 11 servings of grain.
Yeah.
They were achieving the result. So I don't know. Were they doing something wrong? I don't think so. Not based on what they had to go off of.
Yeah. I can see that. I don't know. I agree with you. I think that trauma is, a story you're telling yourself. In some cases, it was the story that you told yourself to get through the environment. Later, when you're no longer in that environment, the story itself is the prison. It's like, hey, when it's not serving you anymore, it's probably pretty important not to let it control you anymore. That said, I think that's a way that trauma takes power over us, but acknowledging it in a similar way takes the power back. For instance, I've been thinking a lot about my relationship with my dad recently. It just keeps popping up, so I've been thinking about it. And like, my experience with him today, he's been dead for 2 years, is different.
Doesn't narrating much.
He doesn't respond at all. Yeah. The dad in my head still does. But I'm re-narrating some of these things. And yes, it's true. I did not have the dad that I deserved as a child. Yes, it made me respond in different ways. It created an environment that was hostile at times, and certainly didn't give me the nurturing that I deserved as a child. And I can either say, and that's where all my problems started. Or I can just say, yeah, that kid did deserve more. He didn't get it, but I am this person today as a result. And like, I'm turning these things around. Everybody's going to have a story. It's not all going to be perfect. Nobody's going to have a perfect story. Some are going to be far more traumatic than others. But, to acknowledge that the kid deserved more, and then to say, everybody deserves more. There's no fair in the world.
Sure.
That's just reality. There's something powerful in that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you're wrong. I just, and I really don't think you're wrong. Like,
yeah,
sometimes it comes up in ways that I'm just like, oh, wow, that is a thing. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I play with my dog, and he's like so prone to playing because we always have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that was a part of my childhood, really, playing. Like occasionally or something, but that sort of instinct to play is not really automatically in me. And I notice its absence sometimes, especially like how quickly my dog just like wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, oh wow, this is like something more other people have that I don't have. Like I have way more instinct to work than play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I deserve to play more? Probably, but it's like, feels really weird to say that. I don't know, why, but I guess I would, and I've processed through that in some ways. Like if I could go back, as an adult, I would make sure that kid played more, got to play more or something. But what are you thinking?
I don't know. Honestly, this is probably a side effect of mindfulness as well, or maybe it's the mushrooms. I'm not sure which, but I feel like, I experienced most of my life as this egoic thing, and then something fractures. And the first thing that I do is a very familiar idea, and it's to construct a new ego. So I go from being the individual ego to being like the universal ego. And as I zoom out from that, there's another layer, at least, and that's the non dual. There is all this abstraction, there are no boundaries. But most of my time, from like a mindful perspective, I end up embodying this universal ego. And that is that I zoom out and I just see it all happening. And there is no judgment. There's no moral right or wrong. There is no should or shouldn't. There is no fair. There is no deserves, because all these ideas are constructed. And it is all just happening. And so I guess when I think about these things, like sometimes it sounds heartless to say that, but to me, I don't know, it's one of the most healing perspectives I've ever embodied, is to just be like, it's all happening. And that feels easy for me as a white male heterosexual person in our society, to just be like, yeah, it's all just happening. Because there are so many people that, I'm very privileged is what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, I don't know. It's something that I encounter on a daily basis multiple times.
Yeah. Do you think that thinking more play would be nice, or something more play instinct would be nice, is like antithetical to it's just happening?
I don't, because even that thought is just happening. It is a product of our society. We see what is quote unquote normal, and we compare and contrast our lives to what we think is normal and what we should expect. And whatever that expectation is, if there's any deficit at all, it's going to create some sort of suffering. So no, it's not wrong to feel that way. But if you zoom out enough and realize that that expectation itself is not given, there is no should, there is no deserves, all of a sudden the expectation goes away, and so does the suffering.
Yeah. So I think what I'm saying is that if you zoom out enough, that there seems to be a lot of play happening. And I don't always have the propensity to that I wish I did. And so it's a place I want to intentionally put effort. It's not like morally wrong to like work. I like work a lot.
Absolutely.
Just like some things do not require great meaning or analysis. Like sometimes I find myself really thinking, like, why do you like playing so much to my dog? Like, why? And what a stupid thing to think. Like, it's just playing. It's fun. That's why he likes it, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think this is like the same as doing, really. Like, just like, it's life. Like, cells are not out there thinking, really, and
Yeah.
neither are the squirrels. Like, they're just doing.
Absolutely.
So I think fun is like the same.
Yeah, you and I had a conversation, and it was about diet. And, I have this concept that I come back to sometimes, and I call it the "you are not a robot" problem. And essentially the idea is that as knowledge increases, as we know more about these things, as we get, more distant perspective and go from the individual to the universal sort of, perspective, that we can create ideals in our mind. And one of the things I just said was sort of this idealistic idea. It's impossible to hold on to 100% as an individual, because you're not going to be the universal 100% of the time.
Sure.
You're not going to be standing from that perspective. What that means is that I exist in this society. I exist around these people. I exist inside a place where these expectations are presented as reality. They are objective to some degree in an intersubjective sort of way. And because of that, I can ascribe to them, and that's fine, and we should. And I guess the idea that I'm getting at here is the ideal isn't necessarily ideal, because it's impossible to exist in a society as an egoless thing. And so, like, the ego is going to have those expectations, and we get to decide what to do with them. And I want to play too. I see that sometimes whenever people are playing or when people dance. I don't get dancing. Like, there is an actual halt.
Same thing. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, why are you doing that and how? I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you're right, but I think the ideal holds some merit. Like, it's there to see.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know, for a long time, the ideal was like, I'll just, one of these days I'm going to get to the point where I eat 93.7 turkey with some salt for every meal. I'll just get there, just slowly. And, what the real thing that works is, like, I'm not going to make those decisions in the moment well, but if I look at them at the end of the day, I can notice trends and I can adjust for the trends, and this works. And I don't have to restrict crazy food groups all the time or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The ideals hold some value, like to look towards and to know what direction to go and how to set your intentions or something. But
yeah, I agree with that. So I think what we're saying is mindfulness seems to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Helps.
Do you think so? Do you have consensus?
I don't like to assign value judgments in that way.
Yeah. If we zoom out a little bit, there is no good or bad. It just is.
So mindfulness.
It just is.
Mindfulness is.
Mindfulness is. Oh, wow. That's so zen.
Yeah.
It's the name of the episode.
Agree? Mindfulness is.
Oh, wow. That's so zen.
No, mindfulness is.
Yep. Well, thanks for being here for this. I hope it was as good for you as anything has ever been.
Woohoo!
Hey, it's Frank again. Thanks for listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. You can also check us out online at theunbecomingplatypus.com. We hope these conversations inspire you to improve your communication skills and deepen your connections with your own friends and loved ones. Until next time, this has been the Unbecoming Platypus podcast.